So, first day, yeah, that's about all. So there's a way of looking at this practice, and first, congratulations. You made it through the first day. Always, for the body, it's such a trial. And this, the train wreck, the collision, truth of confronting stopping is really what it is. So in the tradition, usually we start off and there's things called the graduated teachings. But I decided to hell with it. So unusual of me, isn't it? So, what I would really like to do is go backwards. And it really begins in the sense, I had a teacher, this was back, I was living in Kathmandu, this was 89, I haven't seen this teacher, his name was Urban Tulku. And I would go and take my family, we'd get these blessings, and get bumped on the head, and sprinkled with water, and, blown with all sorts of wonderful incense smells and stuff. And I had my boss, who I worked for there in the early 80s, and he had died of liver cancer there in Kathmandu. And so I had this sort of relationship with the Tibetan community and going through all this. And one day I went to see him, and he sent my wife and the kids in the back, and he said, "You have to come up and sit with me." And I said, "Okay, fine." And he says, "You're a Vipassana teacher, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, try this." And he simply then said, "Okay, this is the nature of your mind." He went, and they're called pointing instructions that just point directly at what it is that sees and notices things. And in my tradition, in the Theravadan tradition, we have a really fabulous word that I've been, probably some of you have heard me speak of it over the years. It's a word called atamayata. Atamayata. Not there with the object. Okay, not there with the object. And it was considered, Ajahn Buddhadasa used to use it was the sword of Buddhism. Atamayata. And the simplicity of it is the non-concocting. That's his translation of it. Non-concocting. Not making up anything about it. Right. So we have these sense doors of our seeing and smelling and tasting and hearing and body sensations and our thoughts, and we're going around all the time believing in them, and then out of that we're concocting, these fabulous stories and realities of how it is. But Atamayata says, no, don't concoct anything. Actually, stop. Turn the mind back on itself to see what it is that notices. That's aware of these, the thinking and the sense doors and all of that. And so the practice in its kind of ultimate is the fact that we have to kind of abandon our world, the world that we know, the story that we make up, the senses that are based on this pleasantness and unpleasantness that keep enchanting us over and over again, enchanting us to actually believe that the next time it'll still be good, and that somehow nothing bad will happen in some way. Well, this atamayata, this truth of non-concocting or not there with the object. And they simply say that there's just only 6 objects. There are the 5 senses and that thinking thing. Not the mind so much, but the thinking itself, thought process. And so our practice is first, it's to know that it's to be free of it all. And we're talking about ultimate freedom here. I like there's a wonderful word in the graduated teachings, which they use the word sotopanna. And sotopanna is the entering the stream, is the translation, entering the stream. And it's the first experience that breaks the notion that there's all this concocting going on. And it's the first kind of moment of kind of awakening. And it is fundamental in this practice as a graduated practice. And I think it's actually possibly more realizable than we can imagine. It's not that far away. Sometimes, though, just that experience is described as, in some of the texts, as a person has an experience and then they look down into the well and they see the water. And they have the smell of that water that's down in the well. But they are not in the water. And so that why they call this a graduated path is just to recognize that's where you are. You get a smell, you see what it is, but you're not there. So we have this practice which first acknowledges that that's there and that is possible. And we're all here because it's possible. It's not something for the, that's out of some history book or something. It's a living tradition that says that, if you put your heart-mind, your heart-mind to this, then there is certain thing that will happen. And that is very cool. It's, in some ways, I say I joke, but in some ways I'm not joking at all. And I say, oh, you're all going to be liberated. You're all going to be liberated. And why? Because you're here. Because what's happening here is pointing. It's looking down into the well. And there's the smell of the water and there is the seeing of the water. You're not getting it, but it's there. It's available. So you have to kind of own that in some sense. And it's not something that's a 1,000 lifetimes away. So there's somehow we have to come and begin to recognize that there is this possibility that there can be a break between the knower and the consciousness and the objects of awareness. There can be a break there. And if there is a break, then I always say it's sort of like a water heater. It has to be reset. And there's certain things that happen when it's reset, so it no longer sees the same way. In my own experience of practice, particularly in my early years where I was very much into just concentration practices, and I remember going to a talk that my teacher gave on, it was simply on, it was only about half an hour, it was on the whole recognition of Sotapanna, of that this was a possibility, that we could actually break the chains, the things that bind us to I could just say this, you know, and that was actually, in a sense, our birthright to recognize that we have the capacity to do that, you know, that the mind can ultimately stop being fooled, you know, and in essence, kind of the ultimate letting go can happen. Sounds good, huh? Now, one of the things about letting go here, it's very interesting, this word that's used so much in the Buddhist text, is the word citta, or sita, which was originally translated as mind. But as these last 30 or 40 years, we've had to retranslate that word because it's really, in the same way that Namarupa, mind-body, is not separate. The mind and the heart are not separate. That what we're talking about here is the heart's sure release. And that there has to be this phenomenal sense of trusting that is really the progress of insight is based on a proper kind of trust. And that trust is something that is developed. And the trust is based on the fact that I used the expression this morning about here and about. You know, so I'm talking about, you know, but there's always here. And here is where all of this is pointing to here. And that here is a place that says there's really no place else. This is it, you know. And if this is actually it, if we can actually trust here, and that trust is all based, first it's somewhat of a mind training, but it's actually the heart that has to let go. You have to be so comfortable in your skin. You have to be so free of the concocting, of making anything up about it. That this surrender, this letting go, this lightning in a clear blue sky. Is the human birthright. That's pretty cool. You know? When you think of, you know, when we think of the concocting, and this is where I now backtrack a little. So I have to start with the whole piece around freedom. It is here, it's available. It takes, in a sense, a lot of trial and error to come to the kind of trust I'm talking about. You know, especially since the creation of who and how I think I am is all based on fear. because it's all based on separateness, on a dualism. And what I was just talking about, it can't be dual. It means that there's enough trust where I can let go of it's even the needing to know it in some level. But somehow, it's enough to just rest in it. But I wish I could say that you could just point at it and be it and that's over. I think that would be kind of very cool. And I think, it can happen for some people. They're rare individuals who can be standing, taking a shower, and suddenly, boom, everything's gone, and they reset, and they are not the same person. They no longer see the same way. And their thinking is actually different. And their heart, how they hold things is different. And how they move is different. But I think they spent a long time, studying and looking at how this all happens. And when they started to look, that it took a long time, because the nature of the objects was always so enchanting that they would forget and get lost in it again. And they forget and get lost in it. And somehow that, if this pleasantness arose, then, why, that should be forever, right? Some very fundamental, askew belief system that had to be over and over and over again studied and recognized for its truth, for what it was. And it's so interesting, I used that thing about the film this morning that because it's moving so fast, this all looks so solid and real. And this process that we're in is in the studying of the film itself. Is actually, we have the privilege here to actually slow it down so that every once in a while we can actually see they're just frames. And so what are the frames? The frames are, there is the consciousness that rises, there is one of the sense doors that's ignited in this phenomenal speed. And we believe somehow that it holds the answer. The film itself holds the answer. It's kind of tough. So you have to spend a long time. First, the process here is to try to slow it down. And slow it down takes, sometimes they use the word calm abiding. That we have to kind of rest in the ability to do one moment at a time. To do one moment at a time. One breath. One step. And so it takes time to begin to kind of slow that film down from very high speed to a place where we begin to study there's a word in Thai, Yogapru, there with the knowing. So there's there with the knowing. So there's a moment where you're seeing, and you know that you're seeing. Or there's a moment there where you know you're hearing. Or you know you're thinking. You have to know. Where you're happening. Where the here is. And of course, as soon as you put your attention there, what happens? It goes somewhere else, doesn't it? Right? As soon as we go, oh, finally! Bingo! You know, you're scratching your butt. Sensation. You know? It's confounding. You know? I wish it was easier. You know? That actually you could kind of still and stop it. But we have to come to this, and we have to spend a few days just slowing down, kind of getting through all the body creaks and the different kinds of pains and the restlessness and the sleepiness and the kind of what am I doing here kind of thing. You know? You have to go through all that. You know? And it's never, I think sometimes it gets easier as you go along because you know what the journey's about. But it still takes the same type of approach. And the approach is you have to slow down. You have to really recognize that there are a lot of feelings and thoughts and stories concocting that's almost like a wave coming from last week, last month, last year. It's all piled up, and so it has to now be hi, how are you? What's your name? And please come in, sit down. And so there has to be some kind of friendliness to parts of ourselves that we haven't really had time or given some kind of accounting to. It's okay, it's part of what happens here. So there's this process of becoming very friendly. Kind of friendly, unfortunately, I will just say friendly with your neurosis, because that's really what it is. It's all your, all the baggage and stuff you've stored, and you can't speed it up. It's going to have to work itself out. And unfortunately, one of the things I find is sometimes it takes a long time. It's like one of the things one of the teachers I used to, the first thing he would do is he start off with sort of doing which I'm going to do tonight at the end of the metta time, is forgiveness practice. Because forgiveness is all about what? It's all about the past. About ourselves, about other people. What we did to them, what they did to us. All of the complexity of our past in some way. And so we have to have this huge kind of heart of this continual process of blowing it and then accepting it. And kind of restarting ourselves, from a place of genuine concern for ourselves and others. in a way, I'm thinking one of Wendell Berry's poems about when you go into the dark, you have to be in the dark. And the dark has its own light. So we have to come and kind of sit sometimes in our own stew, our own story, our own concocting. And somehow the practice itself is learning how to forgive. And it's not forgive and forget, it's actually forgive and remember, because that's what's going on here. And to let the impact of that kind of soften this kind of leaning tower of Pisa itself. We're trying to somehow soften it up. So in a way, there's no way you wouldn't want to hurry this either. Because, lightning in a clear blue sky and some recognition, but doesn't necessarily soften the heart. So there has to be this play of all the subtleties of the story, or the story itself. There's no really practice here of gaining or winning or losing, actually. It's just kind of confounding, If anything more, it's about patience, repetition, and humility. If you see clearly how you construct yourself and how you cause damage to yourself and to others through that construction. It's humbling. It's really humbling. But it takes that to kind of unravel that primitive part of our brain that's so defensive, that is about being right. Would you rather be right than free? That's what it boils down to. And so in a way, we come here and maybe, if anything, we're supposed to be, putting our attention on our breath and gaining some, concentration and one-pointedness. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, because I do believe that happens. But along with it, what's also kind of the tailwind to that is this untangling the tangles. So we have this atamayata, this truth of, that when heart-mind lets go, it's no longer caught up in anything. And that we're in a process of learning how to trust in free fall, because that's what we're talking about here, about some place that says no place on the film. Well, first of all, we can't stop it. And that there's nothing possible in that. So in anything in the senses, there's nothing possible to hold it and make some kind of security out of it. So we have to switch our trust from the world of objects and things and what appear to be what will do it for us, to something else. And the problem with that is the thing that we have to begin trusting in is the fact that there's no ground, paradoxically. You know? Can you sit in not knowing? You know? And can you find trust in everything's out of control? I have no control of it on some level. Okay. And that it's okay that there's in the objects themselves, there's a self-organizing principle. I don't know anything about it, but I know it self-organizes. You know? But I know that my trust can't be there. It actually has to be on the groundlessness itself. It's a pretty tall order. But it's okay, because the thing about the world we live in is it is called samsara for a reason. Sam and Sarah. No, I mean, it keeps proliferating itself so that we keep believing that there's some kind of answer in it. And the Buddha said, no answer there. He said, no, if you look really closely, just the friction of the molecules themselves. Just the fact that that friction is there. That there can be no security in that kind of movement. Can't be. So he simply said the reality of that is that, you know, this deep longing for things to be something will only cause suffering. And that there is the possibility of understanding how they work. And that's what we're doing here. We're trying to understand how they work. Insight. And I can't give you any answers. No. All this is a process. But first of all, recognizing you have the capacity. Everyone in this room has the capacity. That's where I wanted to start. And the other is you're going to get caught up. You're going to get caught up. And my job is to bust you. You know? Because it's just a storyline. It's just a storyline. And you're going to have to go all the way around the storyline and come back. Over and over and over again. Until you really go from seeing the content of it to see that it's the process itself. No. And there is some kind of no longer believing in the play of the sense doors, we could say. You just no longer believe it. And you understand that if you try to do something with it, and you try to make something out of it, there is inevitability to it. No matter even what you cherish will be taken away from you. All attachment has the inevitable built into it. So it allows us to touch it, live with it, but know how it works. And it doesn't, I'm not saying that, you're suddenly going to be detached from it all. You're going to understand how you concoct it, and you manufacture it, and that you know the inevitable consequences of that. And that's insight. You see how it works, And it doesn't mean that, you go off and jump off a bridge. It means that you begin to see what is it that's important in that trust. And is that trust, how does it hold itself? Does it just hold itself in fear and selfing and being right? Or does it hold itself maybe there's a fierceness in touching the world when you know that you will have to let go of it. So there's a way of living fiercely by knowing this. It's not to run away from the objects. It's actually to let the objects maybe the miracle of the self-organizing. There's a miracle of self-organizing that's happening. And the thing is, when we get so caught up, we don't see it. So we don't notice that's so about it. And it's such a privilege to watch grass grow. Such a privilege. And that everybody's going through the same thing. We're all believing and attaching. And eventually losing and suffering over and over again. So suddenly there's oh hi! How you doing? I too suffer because of that. So there's that side of the relative side of it. And I think it's important to acknowledge it. And at the same time, not there with the object. And so ultimately the sword of Buddhism, Dharma, says I can let go of it, but that means I also can live in it. And you'll learn the rest of it. So I think that's enough for the first line. You don't need a whole lot tonight. You just need to be ensured that you're going the right way. And that you have the power to untangle the tangles. And your heart will kind of do the rest. Just sit for a moment. May you see the grass grow.